a Mixnet is essentially a way of trying to answer the question, um, if you assume that someone has a god's eye view of a network, right, of all of the data packets moving in between a network, what is the way to make it so that this god's eye view who can track every packet can't tell who is talking to who and at what time on a really high level, right? So it's essentially just a way of um, making making communications between different nodes in a network unlinkable, breaking the linkability between them, right? And this it does this by not just looking at encrypting the actual data as well. I think everyone has some idea of what even end-to-end encrypted communication is. But it also encrypts the metadata, or like it hides, it obfuscates, it makes private the metadata as well about those communications. Metadata is data about data. So it would be, in a more formal computer context, it would be something like the time that a message or like a packet was sent from, let's say, me to you. Let's use that as the concurrent, like the example throughout. The time that those packets went from me to you, say the location as well, so the IP address that the packet left from and went to, and then those are the two obvious ones. But there's other stuff as well. Maybe like the type of connection you have, the type of machine you're sending, even from just looking at the patterns of encrypted packets moving between, say, a server and a client or something. You can using machine learning, you can basically start deducing, so it's called fingerprinting. You can basically start making assumptions about what kind of traffic is moving there. Is it an email? Are they streaming a video? Is it a video call? Something like this, right? All of these things, when you dragnet all of them, and I'll kind of get into the motivations for them in a moment, but this is part of it. It's like when you have the ability to essentially dragnet all of the traffic going through the internet, and also then put all of this information and crunch it with machine learning, you can start finding patterns. And those patterns can be used to de-anonymize people, right? Like the tiniest of patterns can be used to start de-anonymizing like nodes in this network, people in this network. And then there's also more social stuff as well. There's more social implications that you can kind of draw from metadata. So, say if this is an example that Claudia Diaz, our chief scientist, used in a video, and I love it because it's also a bit cheeky. So say if you have two people and they only text each other around 2 a.m., right? That's it. In their kind of time zone, you can maybe infer something about the relationship between those two people, right? Say if you just text someone around the time you'd maybe do a booty call or something, maybe you can start deducing that kind of a relationship. And obviously that's quite a flippant example, but the same logic then applies in situations that actually, could be really dangerous if that person
wasn't there that
an
story
activist
about,
or a journalist or something,
Sorry, wasn't there that I remember some kind of story about was it a heart rate monitor? I know you were using the example of messaging here, trying to stay on that, but you could couple, I guess, the messaging and the heart rate thing, and elevated heart rate, booty call, late at night, that kind of stuff. And I guess that's also like plays into the kind of the metadata idea that you were talking about. That it's not just necessarily timestamps, it's not just like device IDs. There's a bunch of data that I imagine many people are unaware of. Like who knows what kind of things that your devices and these applications on your devices are recording about you.
Exactly. And I think there's to be specific with the actual, if you were looking at the device data itself, then that's just the data that can be used to de-anonymize. But so really it's not necessarily about the contents of packets, even though those are obviously really important. If someone could read a message, then it doesn't matter that you don't have to go through the step of like trying to find essentially kind of errant patterns or like blips in the kind of patterns that you set up, because you already know what they're talking about. But it's this kind of thing of, even, for instance, privacy hardened browsers, right, don't have a dark theme by default. And that is because actually using a particular theme, that is actually something that's really, really identifiable over time, right? Like that is essentially an erroneous pattern that sticks out if you are then doing all of this kind of fingerprinting and like crunching all of this data, that makes your browser stick out. And that, again, then is starting to make, from that you can infer links between different instances of you, say, hitting a singular website, and then maybe from that you can infer, okay, well, maybe they live in a particular time zone. Say you're, checking your emails at very regular time intervals, right? Then you can probably infer, okay, maybe they're doing it at the beginning and the middle of the day. Maybe we can now infer what time zone they're in. Say if we don't already know the IP, if they know the IP, they already know what time zone you're in. And it's, again, all of these things sound quite incongruous, Everyone's like, okay, well, why does it matter? But that's because surveillance now is... Everyone thinks of surveillance, I think, as like kind of the scene in the X-Files where there's like a huge underground hall and it's like hundreds of people, thousands of people all sat behind computers watching an individual person. Or they think of like phone tapping or something. Whereas actually now you barely need people, because it's just machine learning enabled surveillance is essentially like find patterns in this data and then find blips in those patterns. And then, so it's kind of, as soon as you fall out of the regular pattern, then suddenly you're kind of a statistical node of interest. There's no, the kind of, the relationship between cause and effect is kind of shifted. Beforehand, it was like you're doing suspicious stuff, then maybe they tap your phone or something like this, or you're a civil rights leader that they don't like, they'll tap your phone, they'll try and find out about you. Now it's kind of like you fall out of that statistical pattern of being normal, and then suddenly, through no fault of your own, you might also be doing something completely innocent because the models that they're using are predicated on usually particular ideologies and political views. Then suddenly you're like a node of interest to a machine learning model, and then you kind of get kicked up to a person, if you even think of it like that. So it's the kind of the environment of surveillance has shifted basically from the personal to the to data driven analysis and pattern matching, basically. Yeah. So that's what the Mixnet is kind of trying to prevent.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. Unipunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night is coming.